Welcome to today's conversation. I'm your host, Chuck Hendrickson, Executive Director of Love Overwhelming, where we believe when people are supported, that hope is developed. And that hope empowers people to take the next step in their recovery and life's journey. Today, my conversation is with the chair of the Cowlitz County Homeless and Housing Task Force, Deborah Idlett. Deborah has lived in Cowlitz County her whole life. She's overcome struggles with addiction and homelessness and has an amazing story of survival and resiliency. I want to get right into our conversation with Deborah. I'll have several links at the end of the video where you can access the task force meeting agenda and their meeting minutes. You can view the 10 and 5-year plan to end homelessness in Cowlitz County and a link to the application in case you are interested in being on the task force. All right, let's get to it. Here's my conversation with Deborah. So Deborah, it's good to see you today. How, in this pandemic that we're in the middle of, how are you and your family holding up?
I think we're doing all right. I will tell you that it has never been in my heart to homeschool 4 children while I was working from home and in school myself. And it is definitely not something that I would choose to do. I think it's a lot like a root canal. But,
yeah, that's similar. Hear that often. So tell us, so speaking of kids and homeschooling, and so tell us just a little bit about yourself. And, we know each other pretty well. So, but for people that are listening and watching, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, let's see. My name is Deborah. I am born and raised in Cowlitz County, graduated March 2001. Really uncomfortable with how close that is to 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. My folks live here. My mom graduated from R.I. Long. My dad graduated from Kalama. My grandfather graduated from Kelso and R.I. Long. So, can't hold any of that against me. But yeah, I'm from here, deep family roots. Grew up in this area, and I've experienced a lot of different things in this community, right? I've seen, it's like a lot of people from Cowlitz County. I like a lot of people from Cowlitz County. I am in recovery. What I speak to that, what I mean is that I experience a substance use disorder. So I've lived on the streets here in Cowlitz County. I've lived not on the streets in tents, and I've couch surfed, and I've been part of what I consider the hidden homeless population. The people who are 5, 6, 7, 8 people in somebody's living room deep, right? Or the drug houses or trap houses, as they're commonly referred to. And I've also utilized a majority of the local resources. I was in a class one time in Bridges Out of Poverty course, and we listed all of the resources that we could think of. And I want to say that there was probably 50 to 60 resources that we came up with off the top of our head. And I had utilized all but 4 of them at some point in my life. So,
wow. And so now that you're in this position where, I don't want to give away your story too much, but, your family's doing well, your kids and all that, you're talking about homeschool but the past where you had to utilize all those resources, and now that you're the chair of the Homeless and Housing Task Force within Cowlitz County, can you just speak to how that correlates and how your life experience then can help within that coalition or that task force?
Oh, absolutely. There are barriers and there are things that people don't consider when you've not been there, right? And it's things like, it can be something super simple as well, we require identification. Well, listen, I'm born and raised here, right? I go to DSHS, and my friend since I was a kid, his mom works in the back room, and so she can give me a positive ID, right? She knows who I am, and the lady who gives, but I don't have a piece of paper or an ID that says this is who I am, because I fall asleep and everything gets stolen. Mm-hmm. Right? Or I leave my backpack in somebody's car and I'll be right back and they don't come back. Mm-hmm. Or, and there's or, right? And so something that seems super simple to people who aren't experiencing homelessness, right? Because I don't know about you, but it's been a long time since I woke up and all of my stuff was stolen. Right? But that happens oftentimes when you're experiencing homelessness, and or you can come back to your tent and like it's been ransacked by somebody who thinks that they're cleaning up, right? And so like when you experience all of those things, you have a different perspective on what the real barriers are, because there's perceived barriers. And although some of those perceived barriers I think are legit, the actual barriers you don't necessarily recognize until you've walked through it.
Yeah, definitely. And has that been, and I want to get into what the role of the Housing Task Force is and Housing Homeless Task Force in that, but I just want to go back to, you know, you were talking about your life experience. Can you tell me where your life experience then has taken you today as far as professionally?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can tell, like, I'm always proud to say,
especially as a peer, Deborah, is what I was really getting at.
yeah, absolutely. Well, my clean date is September 30th of 2015, and I was unemployable, I would say, for almost a year. And not because I wasn't like eager to work or didn't want to, but nobody wants to hire somebody who has a pending felony. I'm a drug court graduate, so like I was in drug court at the time. I lived in community house. I had lived in Oxford houses. Like I wasn't really super stable. I'd gotten my kids back fairly young or fairly early in recovery. But it wasn't until July of 2016 that I started the CapWorks training program. And I worked at Red Hat for 1 month. And then I found out that.
Is that through Lower Columbia CAP? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
The job training program?
Jobs training program, yeah. I worked at Red Hat for 1 month. I knew the manager of the store, and she suggested to me that I try and get into that program. And she said, you know, hey, come work at the store for me. And so I did that. And then I found out that Love Overwhelming was a host site. And so I asked to switch because I wanted to get back into social services. And so I switched. And then that actually put me in a position where I worked for Love Overwhelming through the CapWorks program for like 9 months and became a full-time employee, and was able to become a peer. I was the lead over the Intensive Community Services Case Management Program, which was funded through the Kaiser Grant. And then I actually left there in August of 2018. Yep. So 2 years after I started, I left. And I have been working at the Emergency Support Shelter through the Hope Project as a Hope Project advocate. So I work with survivors of sexual assault and their loved ones.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah. And obviously, I know your backstory, your back history as being someone who employed you for a few years and got to see you go from being in active addiction and accessing shelter, severe weather shelter, all the way to becoming a peer support advocate and passing that certification through the state. I mean, what an accomplishment that we were able to see that in you. And the biggest thing that I see now is that now you are the chair, the president, if you will, of the Cowlitz County Homeless and Housing Task Force. So you can see where you've gone from here, we're accessing those services and built that up. And so can you just talk about what the Homeless and Housing Task Force is and what they do and what their role is within homelessness services here in our community?
Absolutely. I think that's actually one of the things I'm really excited to clear up. I think I've seen stuff on Facebook, although I try not to, where people are kind of confused about what our role is. Yeah. So it kind of works like this. Ideally, all money that comes from or through the government has a point of accountability, right? And so the point of accountability for money around housing and homelessness is the Housing Task Force. So our job was to create, originally it was a 10-year, but anyway, the Department of Commerce revamped it. It's a 5-year plan.
Okay, 5-year plan.
5-year plan. This is our plan to not necessarily eradicate, but this is our plan to address homelessness. This is how we are going to approach it for the county. And in order for our county to get the money from the state, we had to have this plan in place. You can choose not to have a housing task force. You can choose to not receive that money. I want to say that there's 12 counties in Washington that chose not to. And that's their prerogative. I'm super grateful that Cowlitz County does have it. We have a massive problem with homelessness and a lack of services, in my opinion. But so our job as a task force is to be just a collection of citizens who come up with these are the priorities. This is the areas that when someone comes to you with a request for a proposal of funds and says, hey, I've got this idea, this is where the money goes, right? So instead of saying like, so I'll be a little fun with it, right? And say, we're only going to house, we're going to do housing first for purple birds, but we have no purple birds in Cowlitz County. It's all blue, right? Yeah. So like our job is to make sure that the money goes to the places that we see a need and to offer a actually community-based perspective on where the need is coming from.
And Deborah, just to back up a second, your guys' role within that, just so that we're clear and to clarify for people that are listening, is you guys don't make decisions on the money or make decisions on who gets funded. You guys just are an advisory committee, if I remember right, that makes these recommendations in the 5-year plan that goes to the county commissioners. And then based off of that, which should be based off of data and the whole homelessness management information system and all of that, then they can make their decisions based on your guys' recommendation. Doesn't mean that they're going to follow the recommendations or what you guys see as number 1 priority through number 20 priority or whatever, but it is an advisory committee to advise and give some ideas to the county commissioners.
Exactly. At the end of the day, I would say that we are the voice. We're doing our best to be the voice of the people to say, this is where we think the money should go. But at the end of the day, the commissioners always have the ability to say, that's cute, we think you're wrong. Yeah. And
yeah.
I mean, they can do pretty much whatever they want with the funding. The only requirement for the funding is that we exist, not that they follow our recommendation.
Got it. Yeah. And within that, you have, you guys don't see any of the proposals or anything. That goes through a whole process, I assume, through.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, I know it goes through Health and Human Services and all of that, right? I mean, again, it's just an advisory role for you guys,
the
county commissioners.
We don't see any of that. We don't participate in any of that. I've had people ask me, why didn't you vote on that? And I'm like, I don't vote on that. I'm not a commissioner, Listen, I got high hopes, but I don't know if that's what they are. Like,
yeah. And in the plan, just to back up about that, about the plan. So I was on the original, one of the task force back in the day where, 2011, there was a plan that was put out. I wasn't a part of that, but it mapped out all these different things that they had wanted to see, interventions within our community that were based on evidence-based best practices. Moving into 2017, there was a revision of that plan, of that 10-year plan, and now another revision as the homeless services being overseen by the Cowlitz County Council of Government. That contract ended, and now Health and Human Services oversees that contract within that. And so moving forward, you guys don't actually put in their agencies that you want to see do this work.
Oh, no.
Or do that. You guys are just recommending interventions, correct? I mean, I'm just saying this because I've heard people say this before, and I've read the plan and I don't see any agencies' names in there, but you want to clarify a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We never recommend an agency. I think that would actually be like a really faulty bias. I can tell you that, like, I literally sit next to people and with people that I disagree with, who they like. We have differing opinions on who should be running the programs. At the end of the day, though, we all agree that these are the programs that need to be being ran, right? Yeah. And that's the point. Like, we don't say like, oh, I want this agency, or oh, I want this agency. We're like, okay, there's a need for case management, and so like we're going to make sure that that's for people who experience mental health and substance use. There needs to be an increase of funding for people like who experience those things to have case management. We don't say which agency is going to run that case management. That would be, so like we say that's the need, then the commissioners ideally will say, oh, that's the number one need. And then, somebody comes up and says, hey, I want to fulfill this need. And they're like, oh, that's the number one need. Here's the money. That's in a perfect process. That's how it works.
Yes, definitely. And so as far as, I know when it changed from the Cowlitz County Council of Governments over to Health and Human Services, the Board of County Commissioners then dissolved, if you will, that task force that was already in place and that was working as the the continuum of care within our community. At that time, I was a part of it, and there were like 30 service providers at least that were on there, and then a handful of community members, including some council members. Council member Wallen was on there for a while, I remember, and then when it went from that contract to Health and Human Services, then there was a whole nother application process, and now there's a whole new team, if you will, on this advisory committee that none of the people that were on there before. I know many applied, and they have kind of what the county commissioners pick and choose who is on that committee. Is that correct? And if so, can you tell the people if they wanted to be a part of this committee, an advisory role for as a community member, how do they go about that?
Yeah. Man, I wish I would have known you were going to ask me this question. I would have set it up so that I could screen share with you and show you how to go to the website and apply.
We can put the website on there, I'm sure.
Okay, good. Put the link on there. Now I see the link across my face right now.
Yes.
So that is correct. There's an interview process. You fill out an application. You kind of say who you are, why you're interested. You have to disclose, obviously, if there would be a conflict of interest. And just enter your application, and then the 3 commissioners interview you, which was a little interesting for me. Obviously, like I said, considering my background, sitting in a room and thinking man, if these people, if we 3 years ago was here right now, it was a weird moment. It was,
yeah.
But and they just asked questions about what I thought about homelessness and what my experience was. I really feel like it was a big benefit for them to have me on the board, because at that time, I don't believe that there was anyone who was there representing people who were experiencing homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, I believe I was the only person who was had stated, "Hey, I've been homeless and this is my experience, and we need to talk to people, not about people, and let me be their voice."
Yeah, no, and that's good to hear. I think that's why, when we were talking earlier about how important it is that you've had that life experience, and not only the life experience, but within Cowlitz County, you've been homeless and experienced that, not only with yourself, but with family and others. And so you're then able to give and be that voice of, hey, this works. And in theory, this may work, but really in actuality, when you're on the streets and you're experiencing this, and this, that's really a big barrier. And so I appreciate that you're on there. And my next question is the same thing: are there more people on the task force that have that lived experience that are peers? And if not, is that something that would be valuable to have, to be able to have more of that voice in there? Or is there anybody who's actively experiencing homelessness on this advisory committee?
So I didn't check out, just so you know, I had to go through the people that I sit and where they sit in my head, because I'm a visual person. No, at this point in time, I don't believe that there's anyone else who has disclosed if they have ever experienced homelessness. So of course I don't want to speak to anyone's personal history and say, oh, no one, because at this point in time, I don't believe anyone has disclosed that. I know we have a couple different service providers, but and when I say service providers, I mean within social services. We have a representative from juvenile detention. There's a defense attorney, but I don't believe that there is. Maybe there's one other person, actually, now that I think about it, but I don't think that. I think that it's been well over 15 years since they experienced homelessness, and I don't know. That system has changed so much in that period of time.
Well, even in the last 3 years, that system has changed. A lot, right?
Even so, like I said, my clean date September 30th of 2015. Since I got clean, the homelessness has all of that system is different. The only reason that I'm still super aware of it is because I worked within the system.
Yeah.
I think it would be. I'm trying to beneficial is not a big enough word. Mm-hmm. I think it would be a massive benefit to people to have someone who's currently experiencing homelessness. The struggle, I think, is ease of application. I mean, I could go on and on. The ease of application, the
Yeah.
like ability to get cleaned up and feel comfortable and confident going into the interview with the commissioners. The ability to
interview with 3 commissioners might be a little intimidating for
right.
for me or you, let alone someone who, anyway, maybe in a different place. That would be hard.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be absolutely incredible to have someone who is like currently experiencing or had recently gotten out of.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that it would be really advantageous for the Cowlitz County Homeless and Housing Task Force to have someone who's actively experiencing homelessness or just newly out of homelessness, and that maybe there could be some outreach done to that population, maybe from Health and Human Services or Coordinated Entry or one of the other service providers. I think that would be a great thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to see that because, again, like I said, we need to be cautious of not talking about people or about people with a certain kind of experience and instead speaking to them. Like, far be it from my privilege to know what it's like to not be caught in the 5 random rainstorms that we had today, right?
Yeah.
Like, because if I have an application on a piece of paper and I don't know where I'm going to be able to fax it in, like, I mean, I could go on and on. And that's just my experiences, right? And I would love to have someone who is currently functioning and trying to access these system points to give a voice and say, this is where the holes are, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter how many times you've driven down a road, if once you stop driving down it, you forget where those potholes are.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so you mentioned service providers, that there were at least maybe you said DOC and juvenile that's there as a part of the task force. I know that when the task force was there, the continuum of care, it was the same thing according to the RCW. However, there were over 30 homeless and substance use disorder providers and mental and behavioral health providers that were at the table and had an active voice in that, as they're the ones giving and doing the services. Is that still a piece that's happening? I heard you mention a little bit, but is that something that's there, or is that something that you say might be missing from the group, or are you guys able to?
We had at one point in time, there was a representative from an outpatient facility, but they haven't been there in several months, so I don't know if they're still there. And then we've had representatives from each of the cities, but I don't know who's filling those spots now that the elections have passed and they're no longer in those seats.
Okay. So you guys are in a little bit of a transition then with some of that stuff.
Yeah. And of course, like, hashtag COVID life, right? Like, we haven't met in a while.
Oh yeah, the fun COVID conversation, right? I knew we couldn't get through this without having a little bit of a conversation about it.
Literally, you can't get through anything without having a conversation about it. So not even going to the drive-through. That's
very true. So tell us, if someone was to come, I mean, can the general public come to any of your guys' meetings? And if so, what can they expect if they're at the meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've actually changed we voted and changed a bylaw a while back. So that was one of the first things that happened after I became chair, was I just saw a need for the fact that, like, our community members don't show up to our meetings because they want to sit in silence. They show up because they want to participate. And I am a believer that, like, when we're dealing with a community problem, we need to have the community at large and like the community participate. And that doesn't mean that, like, you come in here with your opinions and tell me how wrong I am, but, like, you come in here with your opinions and I have mine and we look for a solution. So what we've done is we've allotted a time that is determined by the chair for community questions. So usually what happens is we have extra agendas. And so at this point, like, the 5-year plan has been approved. And so we're kind of just meeting to, like, continue to touch base and see, like, how are things going, and, like, is there any new agencies that we need to have do presentations, like gaining more information, kind of trying to keep a finger on the pulse of what's happening in our community. And then we do our best to make sure that there's time for public comments or questions. And again, like, what I've seen is people think that we're the one who makes the decisions about where the money goes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. It's like a color by numbers, but we suggest that this be blue, but they can paint it whatever color they want,
Got it, yeah. And so I heard you say that maybe then the service providers may not necessarily be a part of that group, but what you guys do is you have service providers come in and give a presentation on what we're doing. I know that like with the severe weather shelter, with the KLMA and Low Overwhelming, we came in and we gave a presentation so that you guys knew exactly what we were doing, and we were, just wanted to update you guys. And is that, I'm hoping that wasn't just a special thing, but you guys are having other service providers come in on a monthly basis or whenever you guys are meeting to present.
Absolutely. Every month we try to have somebody different. And I think it's been interesting and eye-opening. Again, like I said, I've utilized a lot of services in our community. So like I know about them and I know what they are and I know what they're about. And then other people are like, oh, I didn't even know what Oxford was. And I'm like, what? Yeah. And so for those of you that are watching that don't know, it's sober living that doesn't have it's like a voted in hierarchy. There's not like a treatment provider or DOC officer over it. If you look up the 60 Minutes video, they say the inmates run the asylum, right? So, but yeah, like, and we have lots of, so like, because there's all of these other interventions or opportunities or services that are available, but people don't necessarily know about them or aren't aware of how they work.
Yeah.
And a lot of those, like Oxford's fully self-supporting, so they would never be the ones to request an RFP.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, that's good. That's good to hear. I'm glad that there's input being given by the service providers, and then you guys know what's going on and are able to then advise and put stuff in the 5-year plan that you guys see as needed within that. So with that, I have kind of a twofold question. Number one is, do you think that urban camping is the number one need that we have in Cowlitz County? And if not, what do you see the need as? And you knew that I have to ask about urban camping just because I know that was a big recommendation. You weren't the chair at the time, but there's a little bit of controversy over it. And so to me, it seemed like, at least at that time, the task force was pushing it. That was the number one intervention because that was the number one need that was out there of this urban camping. Now we have a non-hosted campsite we all are aware of. And do you think that urban camping is the number one need? And if not, what do you see as the number one need in our community?
It's interesting. I think that, I think back to the conversations about urban camping, and I consider the people that brought it up and that addressed it. I look at, where they're at now, and that they're like, some of those people are running for offices and stuff. And I think that it's really pertinent to say that while urban camping is not the solution, it is a step towards that, right? And no one is saying, well, we're just going to come up with a spot for everybody to camp, and then we're not going to have a homeless problem anymore because they're going to be camping and that's their new address. Like, and if somebody thinks that that's what anyone's saying, then they're really mistaken.
Yeah.
But it's like the whole concept when we were discussing it was people are already outside. They're on public grounds or private property. They're destroying private property and not necessarily intentionally, right? But they have nowhere else to go, and it's having an economic effect on downtown or whatever. Where can we make a safe space that people can be so that we can provide services for them so that they have access to services? And so that's when we began the conversations of urban camping. Do I see it as so it's tricky for me when you say, do I see it as a need? Like, we have it. It's available. Yeah. So like, I don't know if it's a need that's being met as it stands. Do I think that every single person who experiences homelessness is going to go to the camp? No, absolutely not. Not every single person who has the ability to go to Fred Meyer or Safeway goes to Safeway, right? Like, there's going to be issues that you have with people. Like, there's still personalities. Just because I'm experiencing homelessness and you're experiencing homelessness doesn't mean I want to camp near you. Like, what if we've got beef? Like, what if you stole something from me? You know what I mean? So there's always going to be people who stray away from that. But I think we see a majority of people staying in that area, having higher access to services, having higher access to healthcare, having high access, especially in this crisis, in this pandemic, having a higher access to being able to get clean. Like, all of that is such a huge deal.
Yeah. So as moving forward, I know that that you guys don't really have much to do anymore with the the Alabama Street camp, and then there's, this ad hoc committee that's looking at other camp spots within the community and where they can go. But I know that you're not on that committee, but tell me, what is your thoughts on hosted encampment versus a non-hosted? Right now we have a non-hosted that was just thrown together, and it's cost, a lot of money to be able to maintain. And so what are your thoughts? Hosted, non-hosted?
Well, it's one of those things where it's like, I think that, like, my personal opinion would be something along the lines of the fact that, like, it's always better to have something like that hosted. Then you have a little bit of oversight. You have potential for staff to be there. There's a little bit better of a security situation.
Yeah.
I believe that it was Commissioner Mortensen that talked about the fact that, like, he really likes it when the community steps up and does these things for themselves. But it seems like our city had to step up because the concept of a host site was so adverse, right? And so, like, it really ended up being a negative instead of a positive, because the city ended up picking up the bill instead of the county helping fund somebody else to take care of it. And I think I'd have to look at the numbers, but I'm feeling like it would have been cheaper to have it be hosted.
Yeah, probably. I'm not sure. I don't know about the numbers on that. I know just the fence alone was, over 10,000 is what it sounded like. And, but again, you have to have that wherever you're going to host. You have to have all that stuff. As we did the severe weather shelter this winter. We had to, have a fence the whole time, just a screening fence, a privacy fence. And so there are those costs, but yeah, it'll be interesting moving forward. I know that there's several spaces that they've looked at to move the camp, but right now in the middle of the pandemic, obviously it's not going anywhere at this moment. So
I wish that the only thing I have to say about the ad hoc committee is that I really wish that there was someone who experienced homelessness on that ad hoc committee. I think that they're really missing an important voice.
Yeah, well, I'm really hopeful that individuals like yourself and others that we know and are in community with, and also the recovery community as well, that they'll speak up and have a voice and give their opinion and advocate for what they think is right and best for the people. Because again, this isn't about hosted versus non-hosted and this political party versus that party or this program versus that. As we've had many conversations and a lot of stuff that we have common ground about and have found common denominators, it's about the people that we serve and making sure that they're being served. And I really appreciate that about you, Deborah, because even within the committee, just making those recommendations and not having anybody in mind, but just making sure that those interventions that are best practices are getting put out there, and that the commissioners and people know that those are valid programs and interventions. So I really appreciate that.
It's one of those things, it like, I get emotional about it. But, like, those aren't homeless people. Like, that's somebody's mom, that's somebody's daughter, that's somebody's partner, that's just somebody, right? Like, that's someone who has a story, and that's someone who, under different circumstances, could be your coworker, and it just breaks my heart because I think that, I don't want to go off on a tangent. I'm sure you'll edit me if I do, but we are
okay.
Our community and like our culture as a whole is like, oh, support mental health, and supporting mental health is really fine as long as it's palatable, right? But when when it appears like you're talking to yourself and you're wandering down the street and you haven't showered in 3 weeks, like, people want that to be put away. Right? Like, that's too much. That's not supporting that's mental health that I can't handle. That's not palatable. Like, can't you just have minimal depression like everyone else? And so, for me, when I say support mental health, and when I say, I'm talking about the substance use disorder, I'm talking about the extreme mental health, I'm talking about the people who, like, can't function within our society. And no, I'm not saying you should go ship them off but, like, they deserve help and reasonable accommodations that anyone else would.
Yeah, I agree. So coming to the end of our time here, there's a lot that we've talked about within this as the Housing Task Force chair. And Is there anything just maybe even not as the task force chair, but just as Deborah, as who you are, that you want to add into this, and just about the services and in the community, and or encouraging people to come and check out the task force, or and I do want to get to is, if during this pandemic, are you guys meeting? Is that something? Are you guys doing Zoom meetings that we could all chime in and listen to see what's going on? And maybe the Health and Human Services is giving an update about the COVID changes and what different agencies are doing.
So as chair of the task force, of course, I always want to tell people our doors are wide open. I'd love for you to come in. Like I said, at this point, we're kind of at a standstill. They've accepted our 5-year plan. So we're just kind of touching base and trying to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in our community. If you have thoughts, or hey, here's an idea, please come bring it to our attention. As Deborah, I am always looking for new opportunities to help our community, and to help our people, right? Because whether they're our neighbors, and I don't know, I don't feel like my relationship with my God says that I'm supposed to love my neighbor no matter who they are. It doesn't matter whether they vote for the same party that I do or not. It doesn't matter whether they are in the same tax bracket as I am or not. It doesn't matter whether I even like you or not, right? I'm supposed to be loving. And so, if people have ideas or ways that we can better serve, I'm all about that. And I'm also really open to conversation. I know that some people have wanted to talk to me about my experiences and want to know more about well, what was it really like for you to experience homelessness in Cowlitz County, and why didn't you just do this, and why couldn't you just do that? And I'm always open. Of course, my story is my story. I can't speak for the entire community. Yeah. But I can absolutely share my experience and why it took me as long as it did.
Yeah, definitely. No, and that's great. And I'm going to put a couple things. We'll have some links up here to, for those that don't know, when Deborah worked with us, we were able to do a little documentary, a little 3-minute thing on there. And so I'll leave a little link on there, and maybe even take some.
Oh, good. You'll get to see the picture. That'll be great.
Yeah, and throw it in there. There's a great picture of Deborah in active addiction.
I have struggled with addiction since I was about 12 years old. I've experienced homelessness here several times. And one of our friends told us about this warming shelter. We showed up, they had food and they had blankets, and they were really, really kind. That shelter was love overwhelming.
Another video too where I'm very proud of Deborah, if you can't tell already, and everything that she's been through. But I got to attend her drug court graduation with her, and her family was there, her kids were there, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful experience. And so Deborah, thank you for being so resilient and continuing to put one foot in front of the other. I know at times they were just baby steps, but they were still steps. And so I just appreciate that, and especially where you are now, and that you're able to give back to our community in such a big way. That's just incredible. And I just want to say thank you. We appreciate you, and you're doing a good job. Keep it up.
Thank you so much, Chuck. Take care.
All right, you too. Have a good one. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Wow, what an incredible conversation with Deborah. We sure are excited that she's in the position that she is, given the fact that she has that lived experience, especially here in Cowlitz County. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm going to show you where you can find some of the information, the 5-year plan, the application. So as we do this, you can see that I am in a Google search. Here you can see that I've searched Cowlitz County Homeless Housing Task Force, which brings us right here to this top link, Homeless Housing Task Force, Cowlitz County. Click on that link, and this is the main link that has all the information here, which is the one that you'll see on the screen there as well. So you can see right here, we have the agenda and minutes. It gives the last year's worth of agenda and minutes all the way up to date. It gives a little bit of the history here, as well as the purpose, which is the Homeless Housing Task Force is to provide input into the ongoing development of a 10-year homeless housing plan to address homelessness in Cowlitz County, as required by RCW 43.185C.160. You can see that there's more information here, the requirements, where the building is, where the meetings are held. Although I do believe that during this pandemic, they will be going to some type of Zoom meeting so that we can be able to attend and see what's going on. And then if you'll look here at the calendar, and they have all the next 3 months worth of meetings and when they are. If you're interested in applying for the board, you can see here, it says Volunteer Boards and Committees webpage. You can click on that. And that will bring you here to the Volunteer Boards and Committees download application here. You can click on that and you'll see here all the information that you will need to fill out. You will also need to return the completed form to the Board of County Commissioners at their office. And just because you fill out an application and send it in does not mean that you are going to get to be on the board. As several have experienced, the Board of County Commissioners does the interview, and from there they choose whether or not they think that you are a good fit to be on that advisory committee. A big thank you to Deborah for taking her time to be with us to talk about the Homeless and Housing Task Force here in Cowlitz County. And if you're interested in seeing either of the videos or little 3-minute little documentaries, if you will, one was done through Kaiser and one was done on our own, just subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page. You'll be able to see updates as new videos come out and see the old videos that are there as well, and keep up with everything that we are doing. Next week's conversation I'm really excited about. We're going to be talking with several local meal share groups and see and hear how not only do they give away food, but how they are extending hope to individuals who are accessing their services. So it's not just about bringing them them food and what people say as far as just enabling people, but there's a lot more going on. I'm really excited to hear about how they do that and what they're doing within their meal shares. So thank you again. Thank you for listening to the Love Overwhelming podcast, where we believe when people are supported, hope is developed, and hope empowers people to take the next step in their recovery and life's journey. Thanks a lot, everybody. See you later. Stay safe.